So, you've just been told you have an anxiety disorder. This has probably left you feeling a little shocked about what that means for your future and confused about the next steps. In this video, I'm going to break down what it actually means when a professional tells us we have an anxiety disorder, the best way of dealing with that news, what we potentially need to do next, and why this is in no way as worrying as it first seems. I'm Tim Box, and this is what to do when you get diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. So welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time, I'm Tim Box, I'm a mind coach, and for the last 12 years or so I've been working with people to help them overcome all sorts of emotional and psychological issues, and in particular helping people to get control of anxiety. Now, it's really common for the clients I see to tell me they've been officially diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. They might have been told this by their doctor or a mental health professional. They might even have self-diagnosed based on their own research, but inevitably it's a great cause of concern for them, and they want to know what they can do about that. And it can have a huge emotional impact. I've had several clients tell me how they stayed in the house for weeks or even months after they returned from the doctor with their diagnosis, too scared to leave the house in case their anxiety struck when they were away from the safety of their home. However, a diagnosis isn't a life sentence, and the way we respond to being told we now have something apparently wrong with us is largely down to our preconceptions and in some cases misconceptions of what an anxiety disorder actually is. If you've seen any of my other videos, you might well know that I'm not a diagnostic practitioner. This means that when a client comes to see me, I don't attempt to label them with a particular issue or problem, and I certainly don't regard anxiety issues to be an indicator of any illness. Anxiety is an emotion, and framing what's going on with us emotionally as functional rather than pathological is a good starting point towards getting control of it. So let's break this down a little and see if we can't take the sting out of any diagnosis. In the vast majority of cases, the clients I see have received their diagnosis from their doctor. There's a number of reasons why that doesn't mean what we think it means. It's important to remember that a doctor is greatly limited in a number of ways when it comes to working with emotional issues. Firstly, they only get a small amount of time to listen to your concerns and actually hear what's going on with us. On average, a doctor might have 10 or 11 minutes allotted for each patient in their normal working day. Secondly, they're not technically speaking mental health professionals and don't work with emotional issues on a regular basis. Their understanding in this area is inevitably limited, but that's okay. We all have our specialist areas. Don't come to me if you've broken your arm. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the tests that your doctor might have done to see what was wrong with you weren't designed to diagnose a mental health issue. The doctors run tests to rule out any medical cause for whatever physical symptoms you might be experiencing. When a doctor said this might be an anxiety issue, all they're really saying is that they can now confirm there's nothing physically or medically wrong with you. Anxiety is a diagnosis of elimination, in as much as once we rule out any medical issue, we know it must be an emotional or psychological one. This leads us on to our second reason why we don't need to feel condemned by our diagnosis. There are no tests to be done that can confirm whether or not we have an anxiety problem. When it comes to medical issues, the diagnostic process very much involves presenting with certain symptoms. These symptoms give our medical professional cause to suspect a certain issue, and they then run tests on us to confirm or rule that suspected issue out. Once the source of the distress is confirmed, we're then diagnosed and treated accordingly. However, with anxiety, the best we can do is run tests to have any medical cause ruled out, and then conclude it must be an anxiety issue, as that's kind of the only thing left that fits the bill. What this means is that even when we're given this diagnosis by a legitimate mental health professional, it's only given by observing the way we think, feel and behave over a period of time. This makes the nature of any diagnosis fairly nebulous at best, and can only really be an indicator of where we are now, as opposed to a marker for what options we have in terms of emotional growth in the future. This is why a diagnosis doesn't actually lock us in for life. It just means we're currently struggling and we need to do something about the environmental and psychological causes of that. Being diagnosed with a disorder can be a scary experience. A large part of this fear comes from the way we perceive what a disorder is. Very often we regard it to mean a permanent state. The suggestion is that we were born with this particular malfunction and will always in some way have to manage the symptoms that come with it. In truth, there are three contributing factors to how anxious we might feel in any given situation: genetics, psychology, and environment. The perception of a disorder is often that it is primarily genetic. However, in truth, the genetic component to our anxiety response is much less than we might think. Even those that put a lot of store by genetic indicators of responses estimate it's at most about 20% of the story. The much larger factors at play are psychological and environmental. What we go through and how we interpret those experiences and the current situation we find ourselves in are the main factors at play. Even if we suspect we might be genetically predisposed to high anxiety, it would still be necessary for something situationally and experientially to cause us to feel challenged or threatened for any anxiety to spark up at all. The bottom line here is that, practically speaking, disorder doesn't mean illness. Disorder means a state of confusion. The real reason we feel high anxiety is because our mind has become confused in some way and is now triggering a response we regard as inappropriately intense for the presenting situation. Returning back to what we might call normal anxiety levels involves nothing more than clearing up that confusion. I long ago lost count of the amount of clients I've seen who didn't realise the term disorder was in no way meant to suggest a permanent state of being. The very fact that the major factors in our anxiety response are environmental and psychological means all of these responses are transient and prone to change. Every time we learn something new, we potentially shift our understanding of the world, and as a result, our responses to it. And we learn new things every day. One of the main reasons we stay stuck in a particular high anxiety response is because the term disorder has led us to believe we are doomed to permanently malfunction. This is why so many people retreat to the safety of their home when they get diagnosed, because they now fear they aren't actually psychologically equipped to deal with life's challenges. Even if we accept the categorization of an anxiety disorder as a mental illness, it is not a permanent one. You weren't born with an anxiety issue. Your anxiety response developed according to your experiences of life. It can continue to develop. So, what's the first thing you need to do when you get diagnosed with an anxiety issue? Well, it isn't retreat to the safety of your home in the belief you can't handle the outside world. You can, and you will. It isn't Google everything you can find about anxiety disorders and join online groups of sufferers to discuss the best medications. Talking honestly to people who care about you will help much more. And it isn't to scour the internet to find the best therapist that money can buy. Professionals can help, especially when we find the right one for us. And this may be a step you choose to take, but it probably isn't the first step. The first step is to sit with the good news that there is nothing physically or medically wrong that you need to feel concerned about. Sit with the truth that you are well. The anxiety you've been feeling cannot hurt or damage you and is temporary. Accept that the distress you're feeling has been caused by your mind being asked to deal with something it wasn't yet equipped to deal with. Be at peace with the fact that this simply created confusion and a feeling of being under threat. And finally, reassure yourself that the way you feel now will pass as your understanding grows. Now, when we've been told we have an anxiety disorder, we may well at some point choose to seek out professional help and know that this is okay and an extremely positive step. But don't do this because you fear you're broken and you need fixing. Do this because you know you are well but currently struggling. Seeking help is no sign of weakness and is to be regarded as a strong indicator of a healthy respect for your own well-being. At the end of the day, there are times in everyone's life when we could use a guide to help us find the way. Guys, I hope this video has been of value. If you have any questions, then put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer all of them. Or you can ask me directly by joining me every Friday at 6 p.m. GMT for a live anxiety Q&A, where you get to ask me all your anxiety related questions and I do my very best to answer them for you. Please hit that thumbs up button if you like what I do, and why not subscribe to the channel for weekly mind management tips and anxiety advice. But that's it for now. I'm Tim Box, Mind Coach. Always remember to be kind to your mind, and I'll see you next time.